with frontline workers, with the social agencies that we have out there every single day, saving lives, making a difference, with both arms tied behind their back. And they still manage every day to do all the good that they do, but they're fighting a chemical war without the right chemical weapons.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Crisis Storm, where we are trying to depolarize some of the conversation around the crises that we have in our community. Today I am honored to have my good friend Michael Koehn join us here in the studio. Michael is a registered clinical counselor, and I'm going to let Michael tell you a little bit more about his background. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Well, Pete, thank you very much for having me here on the Crisis Storm. I think this is an extremely important contribution to our community, and I just want to thank you and your entire team for making this a reality. I think it's important that we have these conversations, and I appreciate that it's your voice, your heart, and your direction behind them. As someone who lives in this community and cares deeply about the people here, I think we're in a really good place to have these kinds of conversations. So thank you very much for having me here and to be a part of this important work.
Thanks, my friend. You are so good at blowing smoke.
Well, I think it's important to recognize you as the person you are for the contributions you've made to our community. We could have an entire episode about the Peter Cameron Inglis contribution to Kamloops. I know certainly.
Let's not.
Let's. Well, I'm just suggesting, maybe we could extend this episode and we could do that back to back. Maybe we'll slide a second one on the back end here.
I definitely appreciate your words. Thank you. I appreciate it. But let's help for our audience that hasn't had the privilege of getting to know you like I have. Maybe can you give us the Coles? It has to be the Coles Notes because you have done so much. But can you give us a bit of an overview that helps us to understand your background and your experiences as it relates to crises in our community, personal, professional, whatever you would like to share.
Sure. Well, I'm from Kamloops. This is my hometown here. This is where my family lives, where my businesses have all been started. The people that I serve are largely in the Kamloops region. So Kamloops is in my blood. This is home. So from that perspective, everything that we are talking about today is deeply personal to me because this is my community, this is my home. I'm not moving. This is where I live and where I work and where my family is being raised. And so it's extremely important to me that not only do we talk about the important things we're talking about today, but we also work on action and change for the future generation, for all of our children, for everyone in our community. It's important that we have a focus towards the future. And, from a work side, as a registered mental health professional and an individual who has worked in the medical side of industry here in Kamloops, I'm the prior co-founder of the Welcome Back MRI and Pain Management Center that's in downtown Kamloops, working with an exceptional team of professionals there. I also have a background in mental health, working with people with serious illnesses, motor vehicle accidents, workplace accidents, people who have suffered catastrophic loss. I have a private practice in assisting those individuals to be able to have the best possible quality of life, someone who will advocate and support and help to navigate through life's very difficult and dark times. In addition to that, I also work in the cannabis industry as a licensed producer of cannabis. I'm authorized by Health Canada to produce cannabis, which I have a unique focus in, that I'm working right now on being the very first social licensed producer of cannabis that is focused on people and not profits, focused on medicines that do jobs, that serve people. And so when you start to put together some of these aspects and elements of the work, it's deeply personal for me as an individual to care about my community and the people that live in it, because it is my community, and to focus professionally on ways in which people who can serve, who can contribute to the solution, are empowered to do so, that are supported through dialogue and through action towards a better solution than many of the struggles and challenges we've been faced with to date. We put a lot of effort in, but we're still struggling so immensely. And that's why my clinical research work is focused on developing new answers, bold new directions, and finding ways that are a balance between the necessary rules, regulations, structures, and processes that must be in place versus the fact that time is very rapidly running out for far too many people. And the longer we delay implementing new and different, useful and helpful approaches to the major challenges affecting our communities, the more people who will be harmed and the more people who will die. And as I see this in the work that I do in the addiction space, I am uniquely positioned to learn from people that are from all different aspects of this very challenging and diverse landscape, whether it's the individuals with lived experience each day trying to survive in an extremely hostile environment, to health professionals with big hearts who really care, with great skills, who are struggling with the ability to bring those gifts to bear, to make a difference in their community, to families that are all too increasingly bearing the burden of the gaps in our social safety net, to politicians that are well-intentioned, that have a unique role to play in all of this, who may not yet be supported in the way that they need in order to create the change at the levels of government in that way. So to sort of sum everything up together, it's a very complex picture, but at the root of it, it's about people, and that people matter, and that we must do better for people, because if we don't, more lives will be lost, and that is simply unacceptable. So we must do better.
Wow, Mike. You have opened up with your intro a Pandora's box. There is so much to unpack and to talk about here. Hopefully we can do it justice in the next hour. I think first, because of who I know you to be and your background, both as a friend and as a professional in the pain management space, I know that our audience is probably interested in what you have to say about cannabis. You've got some deep experience with regards to cannabis from a medicinal purpose. But I would like to take a deep dive first into pain management, and your thoughts with regards to how the path of seeking pain management might lead to individual crisis. So maybe if we could start with that. I mean, I know that there is a large number of people out in community that believe that addictions is a choice that people make. Let's start with that statement.
Yeah, I think that statement, like all statements that are simplified, we're missing a lot of important information. Anytime there is a statement around choice, we should examine the complete picture. So to just say that a person who suffers chooses to use illicit drugs to treat their pain ignores all of the factors that have led up to that particular moment in time. And so I would encourage people that are listening or watching this to know that a statement like that will actually just quickly separate people into polarized directions. and it will lose the information in the middle, the context, the importance of this. Human beings suffer. We are all people, and we all suffer. But I will say that the options and choices to treat suffering and pain, as you say, in life, has a lot to do with where you started, where you are, and how the rest of your life and the factors involved in it will influence how and what choices are available to you. And a simple example would be, in my work, people are injured in motor vehicle accidents, workplace accidents, and outcomes vary dramatically for individuals, even along similar symptom clusters and injury types. But the question is, well, really, why does one person recover from their injuries and move forward with their life while others may become permanently disabled? We kind of have a similar stigma in that way, that the person who became permanently disabled just didn't work hard enough, or in some way they didn't do the right things. And I would argue that that's not how we need to view this. Instead, when a person suffers, the first thing I would say is that is normal. We're human. We all suffer. There's a commonality to that suffering. The next would be, what options are available to an individual? In a workplace accident, if a person has sufficient financial means, they may be able to, for example, take other choices like waiting, for example. You can afford to wait if you have enough money to pay for your daily needs. You can afford to purchase private therapies that are expedited. You can afford medications that are not covered. You can afford to be able to even go or travel or have a broader pool of medical experts who could support you. Depending on your mental status, your capacity to advocate for yourself, you may be able to negotiate and advocate more powerfully on your behalf, therefore unlocking more resources for yourself. You may also have a greater pool of people who can assist you, provide assistance in those gaps that may exist. Now, for any of these things and many others I haven't mentioned, you can push the slider to the other direction. A person with no funds in the bank, a person with a limited or overburdened network of friends, to a person who has perhaps additional restrictions upon their ability to access help or to access their own self-advocacy due to a head injury, for example. And we put these two people side by side and we say, well, how come one of them recovers and goes on in life while the other one does not? And we often reduce it down to factors that miss the middle, they miss the sides, they miss the up, the down, and we pick and choose what we look at and make that the way that we view it. Now, to some degree, Pete, that's kind of how people work when there's an overwhelming or complex idea. We tend to use some reductionism, and we'll bring it down to a point that helps us to better pick a side or to pick a way of making it make sense to us as an individual. Because as we're all overwhelmed with too many facts and too much information, we're trying to find simpler ways to navigate through that. One way is to look at a complex problem as just a piece of the problem, or a reduced or simplified treatment of that problem. And I would argue, coming back to your word about pain, that's one of our big challenges right off the bat. So a person choosing to use an illicit drug to medicate their suffering misses the entire picture of that person, of that human being, of their experience mattering, of them as an individual mattering. And if people mattered, would we take the time to understand them?
I don't want to lessen what you're saying. I think what you're saying is very important. You know all too well that I have a personal connection with pain that you've helped me with. December, I just had my 50th surgery. And you have helped me with getting off the opioids that were prescribed to me in the hospital. but my mind goes back to a time when I was, one of the times that I was spending a lot of time in the hospital, that I was completely relying on the relief that hydromorphone gave me from being cut open stem to stern. And I remember coming out of the hospital, and thank God I had you to help, because I was told that there was no more hydromorphone once I got out of the hospital, and that I had to line up at the methadone clinic and step down using methadone in order to get off the opioids that I was prescribed for the pain that I had post-surgery. So, is this a common experience? Is this an aspect of part of what's broken in our medical establishment? Are there more cases that are like this but have some differences? Wait, tell me a little bit about your experiences or your understanding of the paths that our current medical system put people on.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point about looking at the system as it is right now. And, you know, to give you a sort of a sense of it, people only have options based on what is accessible to them. So it's really important to know that not everybody has the same options available to them. But to your point, the public health system is supposed to be that option available to everybody. So what is that option like? Well, as you mentioned on the opiate path, here we have an essential medical tool that unfortunately has a very mixed experience for the patient. One, it can be of incredible importance for people with pain. But for something that helps, we have to always put it to the three-part test. And this cuts through, in my opinion, all the noise and questioning about treatment. So let's bring it down to three things. Dr. Carolyn McCallum is an internal medicine specialist in Vancouver, and she did a paper in 2018 which focused on, with Dr. Ethan Russo, which focused on the clinical success factors for medical cannabis. I'm going to bring it right back to your point here, but I want to make it clear that the research showed that there were three things that patients understood to constitute treatment success. The first being an improvement in symptom control. The second being an improvement in daily function, and the third being an improvement in quality of life. So, symptom control, function, quality of life.
Doesn't quality of life follow with a reduction in symptom and an increase in function?
Well, I think you're onto it, but there's a little nuance there that we can explore, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. First, I want to run the opiate test through.
Okay.
All right. Now, let's look at yourself and let's say, now, do you have an improvement in your symptom control, in this case, pain management, by using the opiate? Does it improve your symptom control?
It does.
It does. Does it improve your ability to function?
It improves my ability to function in moderation. So if I have too much hydromorphone, I have a lack of clarity of thought. Conversely, when I'm coming off of hydromorphone and there is none, but my body is craving it, there is an absolute immense absence of thought. It's all consuming. I can't think about anything else. But when I'm on a moderate amount of hydromorphone, I feel no pain and I'm able to function.
Great. And see, from the patient experience, this is why we need to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the third would be, does hydromorphone improve your quality of life?
It does.
Okay.
When I'm in need of it.
When you're in need of it. Okay.
It also takes away my quality of life if I am not in need of it physically, but rather as I have no way to get off of it.
Okay. All right. So you see, now we've taken a complex idea And we're able now to have 3 points where you and I can talk about it really meaningfully. So we take hydromorphone. It can, yes, improve symptom control. But what happens once you habituate to it and you need more and more and more? Does it improve your symptom control? No. So here's the thing.
In higher doses.
In higher doses, longer period of time,
Yeah.
right? When you ask, well, what's the experience that patients are, this is what I hear. Okay, it works for a time at a moderate dose. And for folks that can create a program that works around that, they can potentially maintain that benefit, which is the real point of this. So improvement in symptom control, yes, but there's a star next to it. And there's fine print. Okay. Second, does function improve? Yes, when I use it moderately and it helps to treat my pain, I can do more. So I can be more engaged in my life. That's great. And then we go, but, and here's where the but part again comes in. I take too much. I take it for too long. The dose is too high. Or if I'm without it and suffering from that process, definitely not. So again, we have a yes, but we have a star next to that. And we have a whole other side of the equation, which is very clearly no. And then we go to quality of life. Same thing. Yes, the drug for a time at a dose under a particular usage pattern may actually improve quality of life. And then we say, but the longer you're on it, the higher the dose, and depending on some other factors, does it improve quality of life? No, decidedly no. So what we have now is a profile of yes, 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 under very specific circumstances. Otherwise, no, no, no. So the challenge being, Pete, is that the average patient walking into a doctor's office with a pain problem is seeking the first scenario, yes, 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 which for a time they may experience. But what happens when yes, yes, yes becomes no, 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 and you want to try to turn it back into yes, yes, yes? But you can't get the drug because, as you say, the doctors limit this and they put a cap on it, as they must, due to the regulatory requirements and the fact that they have an obligation to their patient. So doctors are trying to find ways to help patients to not suffer, to be able to have better control, to function, to live, to have a quality of life. And yet the tool set, the typical tool set, has either limited efficacy or it balances basically on a knife edge. Go too far, we're in a very different scenario. And I would argue one that patients are not prepared for, that they're not well equipped to handle, and that, as you mentioned, the withdrawal process, the stepping down and out process, well, this is a whole...
There is no process.
The standard medical process is a longer-term, substitution-based program that tries to help a patient go from something that is more harmful or not efficacious to something that will then still provide results, but provide a direction towards less. So the concern is that the patient walking into the system is essentially walking into, well, how would we characterize this? At best, it's something that's well-intentioned but ends up often being poor in its results. And at worst, this is a trap, essentially. Because, as I said, patients are not prepared for the intensity of what this experience can bring, how difficult and how long and how much work and suffering is required to manage not just the pain syndrome, but the medications that are supposed to be alleviating suffering. So patients then end up with a higher overall symptom burden. And then the question is, what do they do about it?
Okay, but is my case not a rare case? I mean, surely my experience is not a very common experience.
I would argue it is very much a common experience, and I would say that in my work, in working with folks that have been street involved, who have come out of the toxic drug supply, when you sit one-on-one and ask these individuals, tell me about your life, tell me about your pain, where the pain came from in your life, and you will often find, yes, many people will talk about abuse. people will talk about trauma. Many people will talk about injury. Now, injury that's otherwise sustained in workplace accidents, motor vehicle accidents, or due to the environment that they live in. So I would argue that your experience of this is not actually all that uncommon. It's just that some people can actually, in essence, manage this much better with perhaps a much less obvious kind of result, because they're one of those folks that I mentioned earlier that may have more resources, they may have more supports, they may have a very different environment that they are suffering within, as opposed to an individual who lacks those particular supports. And that has a lot to do with what happens when you struggle with when the standard path of pain management reaches either an impasse or it reaches its end and needs to now go to other medications. It's going to matter a lot as to who's around you and what have you got.
Okay. So this is obviously where your passion for the efficacy around around cannabis as a medical treatment comes from.
Yeah, I think, Pete, it's important that that three-part test is applied to all therapies. It could be applied to yoga. If yoga, and often it does, improve symptom control, function, and quality of life, then I say lock it down. Yoga's the thing. Let's do it. And there's a number of wonderful yoga practitioners who do things like gentle and restorative yoga. Fabulous. We should do that. So the same standard by which I hold any therapy, I hold cannabis. The reason for that is that I don't want to stigmatize a potential tool or medication that can serve by having a history attached to it that is irrelevant to the utility that we are seeking. So, does it do symptom control, function, quality of life? Yes, yes, and yes. I am naturally interested in this as a logical person who works with people in pain, who suffer immensely. Anytime I can find a tool, a service, something that a patient reports, yes, yes, and yes to, I now want to know how we can harness the power of that. Can we replicate it? Can we demonstrate efficacy across diverse groups of people? Can we develop treatment programming? And can we make a difference? So again, same three-part test, no matter what the thing is. It just so happens that there are certain tools we do have legal access to, and certain tools that are still in development or transition, or maybe they're not quite available broadly enough yet. So our tool set is in the cannabinoids, because they're legal and available with physician support, clinical support, Health Canada support. We have paths and avenues that we can pursue. There's certainly, I would argue, emerging paths as opposed to extremely well-established ones, but nevertheless, there is a legal precedent that provides access to some degree greater than just hoping we can use something. There are paths.
Okay. So I didn't think we would get this deep into the cannabis issue or cannabis discussion this earlier in the conversation, but there is an elephant in the room. Now that we're talking about cannabis, I'd like to address. So cannabis as a medicinal use purpose versus cannabis as a recreational use purpose. Now it's legal for recreational use. There is a lot of concern in community, as there always has been, around the efficacy of cannabis. Even this morning I was reading a clinical study that was released with respect to the number of psychoses going into emergency room departments. This clinical study had looked at from 2016 all the way through past, 2 or 3 years past the legalization of cannabis. Are you familiar with the study?
Yeah, absolutely.
And while it looked while it wasn't damning, it did suggest that that cannabis can trigger psychoses, especially in adolescent and pre-adolescent youth. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really important that right off the bat we look at that word cannabis that you just said, and we realize that we are not specific enough. So think of cannabis as a rainbow, and you just said red.
Okay.
And I'm going, whoa, hold on a sec here, Pete. You just said red. But what about all the other colors in the rainbow? How come you're saying the rainbow is the color red? And
Right.
I'm arguing the rainbow is the entire spectrum of everything it is. Now, right off
By
the bat.
red, you mean THC.
And we're going to get to that in just one sec. Okay. So cannabis has over 500 compounds that have been identified, many of which have interactions with human health. Okay. In the clinic, there is one particular path that I see being the worst performer when it comes to my 3-part test. Okay? And if I were to look at the entire spectrum of cannabinoids and I were to identify the least effective medical treatment, it would be smoking high THC with high amounts, so high frequency, with no other what I would call balancing or buffering cannabinoids in the mix. So we're talking about your stereotypical user who would roll a joint, smoke it, it's a high THC, 20+% of THC, and once that one's done, there's a brief period or pause, and then there is a drive for consumption of more. And the same thing, another one, and we see this habituation and tolerance to higher and higher until people then use concentrated forms of cannabis, whether it's vape pens, whether it's using other forms of concentrates, and then people are now only using high THC in a concentrated fashion. We've gone from 20% now into 50, into 70, in up to 90% THC. And so what happens at this point is we again revisit the 3-part test. Are medical users that strictly use inhaled high THC have the poorest outcome when it comes to the 3-part test? So symptom control, yes, but we got a little star next to it. I get some relief, but I don't get enough relief. So I need more and more frequently and higher.
Starting to sound like a opioid.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah. Okay, function. Yeah, it helps me kind of move for a little bit, but then I get really tired. And so I'm on the couch and I just need to sort of rest or sleep, and I feel groggy, I feel heavy. I go, oh, okay. Well, functionally, we have a little bit of functional gain, but at the price of a larger dysfunction when it comes to that. And then quality of life. Well, I guess it kind of helps me somewhat, but I'm not thriving. So we're not seeing the real key to it. We're getting a no, no, no. So here I am saying cannabis as a no, 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 because it doesn't pass the test. And in fact, clinically, this is one of the importance about having medical oversight and clinical guidance from people that work with this. We would never design a treatment program for an individual for high THC consumption inhaled format, and that would be the end of it. It's the exact opposite of actually how we work. Whereas in modern medical cannabis, if you come to me brand new and say, I have any number of symptoms I'm dealing with, the first thing I'm going to do is work with you on the minimally to non-impairing oral format, long-acting cannabinoid treatment before we would have any discussion, if at all, about inhalation therapy, let alone high THC. It's not that it doesn't have its place. It's like trying to have a hockey team with only the center. You're going to score some goals, but a whole bunch of them, you're going to lose the game. Okay? So it's important to understand what we're looking at and talking about.
So we talked a little bit about THC.
Yes.
For the uneducated user, I mean, what are these other cannabinoids?
Sure.
How do you get? How do you find, if you need them, access to be able to get? I mean, the cannabis that is being consumed now, it seems, is being manufactured to produce a lot of THC. There's a big focus on THC. Are we losing the other cannabinoids? And if not, how do we get access to them?
Yeah, so in a recreational sense, the retailers are selling what sells. And THC, when it's used on its own without buffering agents, can have a very short action of effect and a desire to use more. And from a retail standpoint, that would be perhaps the most sensible way for them to sell their product, which would be to use something that has a desirable effect for a consumer. It doesn't last long, and the more they use it, the more they want to use, the more they feel they might need to use. That's an excellent way for them to sell as many units as possible of their cannabis product. In the medical space, we are utility-based. We are symptom-based. We are job-based. So we're not focused on the same tool set that we see in the recreational stores. So by contrast, in medical cannabis in Canada, you access it by seeing a doctor who writes an authorization, which is the equivalent of a prescription. But remember, we have the whole rainbow. It's countless products, thousands of products, limitless numbers of products, which is why Health Canada can't put a drug identification number on it and tell you that it's this product, because they're all different. Instead, the doctor says, I will authorize you to use cannabis. The doctor can either say, just use this, and I'll spell it out for you, or they can give you a key to the cannabis cabinet. You go online to the medical licensed producer of cannabis. You then sign in. They've already verified that a medical document is on file from your doctor, and they unlock your account so that you can then purchase. And so these licensed producers are Health Canada regulated, and what they offer is a marketplace of different products. From there, a person will be able to select and purchase the individual products as recommended by their clinical support team and use it according to a treatment guide that says what product, what dose, when, how, exactly spelling out the process that the patient should follow, similar to traditional pharmaceuticals. In those medical marketplaces, you have access to some of these other tools that we talk about. When I speak about the minimally to non-impairing toolkit, I want people to be able to imagine there is an entire toolkit of cannabis products that in fact may not induce any intoxication or any impairment, or only minimally so, to the point where this is of tremendous utility and value. Now, the difference between recreational and medical cannabis is utility, intention, direction, oversight, guidance. Some of the exact same products that are in the medical marketplace are sold in your local government authorized dispensary. The exact same product from the same manufacturer. Now, you can't go in there and buy it and write it off your income. You can only do that off the online places that go through your doctor. But let's be clear, some of those tools are actually in the stores first before the medical suppliers put them on their marketplaces. We've seen innovation in some of the minor cannabinoids, in fact, come out in the recreational space first. The only difference is you can't walk into the store and say, I have pain. Can you help me, person in retail store? The person says, no, we can't have those conversations. I can tell you what's on the label. I can direct you towards smells, tastes, but I cannot discuss effects. I cannot discuss utility, how you may use this product to solve problems or to do jobs. That's expressly forbidden. That only works from the clinic. And so when people are trying to get answers about which products they might use, you're speaking to a perhaps bud tender, which is kind of the term used for people that work in recreational stores. And much like a bartender, they're basically serving up many different flavors and mixtures and cocktails of high THC formulations. With some notable exceptions, but it's a really small component of the store compared to high THC. So if that's where you're going for your information or your guidance or your support, as many patients do, well, where are you being steered towards? But what they know, which is primarily a high THC formulation, which, remember, as I said, if you come into the clinic, we are not going to look at starting you on something that is going to have the potential for that intoxication, impairment, dependence, and to have people on an escalating dosage schedule, while at the same time failing to fulfill the 3-part test. So it's extremely important to know that the difference between the two of them is all about what tools and what jobs and how to put it together in a sensible fashion, the same as any other medication.
Can you give me an example or a couple of examples of these other non-intoxicating tools?
Absolutely. So, for example, we have a lot of interest right now in something called CBN. And CBN is a natural process where THC degrades and becomes a different chemical. So, for example, if you had a bag full of cannabis buds and you threw it in your drawer and you forgot about it for a few years, and then you took it out of that drawer there and you went and you maybe rolled a joint and you smoked it. Well, what would be different between when you put it in the drawer or a few years later? Well, what's happened chemically is some of that THC has oxidized. So air, light, heat, and what ends up happening is the chemical changes into what's called CBN. CBN appears to provide a sedative effect, something that is primarily used for sleep, though it does have some other purposes. And I would argue there's some mental health areas of great interest. For example, in ADHD or anxiety or mood stabilization. These are areas of interest. But CBN is primarily being focused on right now as a sleep aid. And so it's being combined with CBD, which a lot of people know as cannabidiol, which is the non-impairing cannabinoid that people usually know about with THC and CBD. So they put CBD and CBN into a gummy or into an oil with almost no THC whatsoever. And people will take these gummies and it will assist with sleep, for example. One of the most important foundations of all health and recovery, mental health, physical health, no matter what the condition, is to help establish a good sleep pattern. So a very concrete example would be, is there a role for CBN with a patient coming in with a sleep disorder, difficulty getting to sleep, staying asleep? If you wake up, how quickly can you go back to sleep? What is your total number of hours of sleep? How refreshed do you feel in the morning? So then we can take a tool like that, and without the person becoming intoxicated, they may be a little bit impaired, and that's where I say the minimally part, but they now may find themselves falling asleep, staying asleep. They wake up, they go back to sleep, they get more hours of rest, and this now becomes the foundation for the rest of their recovery program.
When I think about people in my life that are on sleep medication, I think about how ineffective some of that sleep medication is, in that, yes, it knocks them out, but they report back saying, yes, it looks like to everyone else they're sleeping, but they don't feel like they're getting any rest. And so, it leads me to conclude they're not getting a deep enough sleep. They're not going into that REM state or whatever that they need to reach. Is that something that CBN assists with?
I think it's important to know that there may be one additional factor that people might be speaking about in terms of sleep medications. And this comes down to the half-life of the medication. For example, a lot of sleeping medications may have a half-life of about 12 hours, which means that in essence there is a period of effect. Now, most people don't sleep 12 hours. If lucky, we kind of have an 8-hour night. But notice we have a 12-hour effect window. So what's happening during those 4 hours in the morning while the individual is still under the effect of a sleeping medication while trying to initiate their day? How will they report their doing? How will they report their night's sleep was when they're still under the effect of the medication designed to make them sleep when they need to get going and functioning, doing something in their day? So I would say, first off the bat, the amount of time that CBN, for example, appears to have its window of effect is more like 6 to 8 hours. So for people that are on the 8-hour side of it, we're kind of right at that point where we're now ready to transition to an active part of the day, and the medication says, it's been nice seeing you. See you tonight. Whereas the other medication is like, I'll be here for your whole morning. See ya, I'll be here till lunchtime for some people. And as a result, we end up having a confusion around what's really going on with your sleep. Are you still under the effect of the medication, and that's why you feel tired? Or did you actually get rest? Was the rest that you got interrupted or disturbed? So again, there's a number of factors around sleep. So that's why I look at the model. Do you fall asleep, stay asleep? Can you get back to sleep? Do you feel like you got enough hours of rest? And what's your total number of hours of sleep that you're now getting? We put those factors together and we can usually understand a person's sleep problem and apply a cannabinoid-based treatment that can assist people to have that restorative and restful sleep, which then improves the mental health, physical health, and even perhaps the efficacy of medications they're taking because a person is rested.
This is the Crisis Storm, and we've been speaking to Michael Koehn from the Cannsolve Clinic about the crisis storm in our community and what our response to it could be. We'll be right back with more conversation with Michael right after these messages.
In Kamloops, we're not just lawyers, we're forward law. We're about moving you forward. Approachable, caring, and experienced. That's who we are. From contract writing to estate planning, civil litigation to employment law, whatever your need, we've got your back. We push for fair resolutions. We're not afraid to take on the tough cases. Forward-thinking estate planning, strong advocacy, and unwavering support. Forward Law, your partner in progress. Call us today, because your future deserves nothing less. Welcome to the heart of business in Kamloops, Southgate Business Center, your one-stop destination for all your office needs. Conveniently located at 970 Laval Crescent, Southgate Business Center offers more than just office space. Whether you're a startup, a freelancer, or a well-established business, we've got you covered. Need a professional office space? Our offices provide the ideal environment for productivity and success. Planning a meeting or presentation? Elevate your business with our conference room available for rent. At Southgate Business Center, we understand the importance of efficiency. Our secretarial services ensure you have the support you need so you can focus on what matters most, growing your business. For office rentals, conference rooms, secretarial services, and more, contact Southgate Business Center at 250-374-9233 or visit us at 970 Laval Crescent in Kamloops. Southgate Business Center, your destination for success in the heart of Kamloops. Call us today and experience a new level of business excellence.
I want to go back for a minute just to make sure that I'm clear with what you were saying with respect to psychosis-inducing aspects that are being attributed to cannabis. I don't think we really completely addressed all of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. When I talk about the worst treatment outcome, that's how I'm addressing that particular part of the equation. I think there's no argument that individuals who may be predisposed to psychosis have additional concerns that they need to adequately address with cannabis therapy. Again, self-medication is really one of the biggest risks here. People walking into an environment where they're accessing cannabis without appropriate supports in an environment that's geared towards high THC. And there is absolutely evidence in the literature to demonstrate that people that may be predisposed towards schizophrenia, for example, may in fact induce the psychosis associated with this by using an unbalanced high THC inhalation, multiple use format, concentrated, even worse. And so to answer your question very directly, no, I do not believe that people with those particular vulnerabilities should be using a high THC treatment program. In our clinic, we would be analyzing all of these factors, and we would be advising patients against products and usage patterns that could exacerbate or worsen. But does that mean that that same patient shouldn't have access to the minimally to non-impairing toolkits? CBD, CBDA, THCA, CBN, THCV, any of these compounds and others that may be profoundly mood stabilizing, which may be helpful to a patient that is struggling with a constellation of symptoms and not receiving adequate relief from their psychiatric regimen. And so I'm excited for any time we collaborate with psychiatrists on creating hybrid treatment programs that blend conventional pharmacotherapy for people with mental health disorders, along with an adjunctive or in addition to way of viewing cannabis as a very important player on the team. Maybe not the only one, but certainly we should not discount the role, because one element of that rainbow can be overused, and frequently is, because it's far more available in terms of knowledge and product. So the accessibility of the problematic usage is there. The accessibility of the highly strategic, utility-based treatment is almost non-existent in many of these populations. And so, to your point, yes, the risk is real. Yes, it absolutely happens. And we also see things called cannabis hyperemesis, which is where people that overuse very high concentrations of THC can actually induce a syndrome whereby their body has a regulation problem, resulting in significant dysfunction for a period of time, with the only actual improvement being ceasing high THC inhaled cannabis, which is really tough, because the same symptoms they're experiencing, they want to treat using cannabis. But in essence, we've overworked that particular piece of the puzzle, ignoring this incredibly rich tool set, or being unaware of, which can in fact not only help to alleviate those particular concerns, but in fact don't carry or appear to carry the same types of dependence potential, intoxication, impairment, or harm. So it's important that we look at the THC as being an increasingly smaller and smaller, important, and always will be, but a smaller and smaller player in the medical space as new treatments and tools, including the ones we research. I'm not interested in THC primarily at all in the heaviest lifting work that we do,
Right.
because the other tools pass the 3-part test.
But access
Huge
still
problem.
exists, and it is a huge problem. So
Absolutely.
just to ask one more question, I don't mean to belabor on it,
Sure.
but while this is not about cannabis, this show is not about cannabis, for fear of it becoming another crisis, just with respect to the psychosis, one more question. Is there any correlation between gender or age with respect to risk of psychosis?
I would argue that it's always important to pay attention to those types of things, but I would argue there's other parts that are perhaps even more directly relevant to an individual's vulnerability to this. For example, if we were to go to a street-involved population, people that are in the toxic drug supply who are attempting to use cannabis as a harm reduction tool, and we were to look within that group, the health of that particular individual, their pre-existing conditions, other medications they may be using, but relevant aspects of their health history would be, in my opinion, far more important, as opposed to a gender difference between men or women. So I think we want to...
What about age?
Well, I think age really comes down to the same question about vulnerability. There are people that age with a different level of vulnerability than others. Some, just by age alone, we can infer greater vulnerability. But for some people, as they age, we may not be able to as strongly infer that that means they're more vulnerable. But so I would say that depending on the population we're studying, in our street-involved population, those folks, yes, I would say that age is a really important factor to consider. Men and women, I think there are things there that are important, but again, that may not tell enough of the story for us. I would say that the population itself and the pre-existing conditions within it, the symptom burden in particular, other psychosocial factors would be the areas I would focus on in terms of how the cannabis usage could become problematic versus useful.
Okay. Now, so we've made a transition here that I don't think the audience realizes, but you're starting to talk a little bit more about street-entrenched population. You're starting to talk about that particular vulnerable population. And within your introduction, I don't know if we really got a deep understanding of how you're connected to this space. Sure. So perhaps we could start with just, if you could share your level of experience and what you're doing in the space of individuals currently being treated for mental health challenges, homelessness, the marginalized populations in our community of Kamloops. How are you involved with them? Where are you involved with them? What are you doing in this space?
Yeah, great question, and I'm happy to dig into this. I think it's important that we do discuss this. My particular interest is in helping individuals that are in the most vulnerable populations. And so here in Kamloops, there's two particular populations of individuals that I identified as being both within an area of experience that I could work with, but also some of our greatest need, some of our most difficult circumstances and our least effectiveness in seeing the kinds of improvements and change and growth and improvement that we'd like to see. So these two populations are, as I say, street-involved individuals who are exposed to the toxic drug supply. And in particular, with a focus on how to transition those individuals from a space of great risk of life and death on a daily basis to a more stable environment where we can focus on providing the resources and the needs to go from life or death now to a place of greater stability. From that space, helping an individual to treat their conditions, to receive support and help, to focus on healing and focusing on growth and on education and employment, stable long-term housing, and assisting people through it all to pass the 3-part test. So as they go through this process, can they have symptom control, function, and quality of life 24/7 throughout the entire process? Now, I'm not pie in the sky. I realize there's an aspirational aspect to saying 24/7 for such a greatly affected population of people. But the goal is to ensure stability, because from that, we observe in our research the real change we need to see. Now, population number 2, individuals who have been released recently from the criminal justice system, now transitioning through the parole system and corrections, whether it's Corrections BC or Corrections Canada, people that are transitioning to halfway houses within our community, that are suffering with an incredible burden of mental health, physical health problems, and psychosocial issues. Same question. If that population of individuals had the ability to chemically stabilize so that they had symptom control, function, and quality of life each and every day, what would be possible in terms of reducing recidivism, and also to help these people to thrive? In both of these populations, we have a great deal of risk. We have a great deal of risk of harm to the individual, and in addition, harm to community, because we have people that are suffering who are desperate to alleviate that suffering and are trapped. Well, that's not good for anyone when that's the circumstance. So the question could be, could an intervention be developed that would be delivered to these groups of individuals? And if we delivered that intervention and we studied that, would we observe in the vast majority of people the 3 S's? And if we did, what would the outcomes be for these individuals who are at incredibly high risk of relapsing or recidivism and to go backwards rather than forwards? And at the most extreme of this, we lose people. People die. But on the other side, when things go really well, these folks not only stabilize, but go on to greater opportunity in life, and they thrive.
So looking at your face as you're asking these questions, because I know you, I suspect that there is an answer here, and that you're not asking hypothetical questions, but this is something you are working on.
Well, Pete, as a researcher and a clinician, I think to some degree we're always asking. And we're always wondering, and we're always seeking greater clarity, bigger sample sizes, ways to strengthen and take our research and strengthen it and improve it. Because the smile on my face is based on me envisioning any of the people in our program that I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with. They are my teachers. Everything I know about how to help today has come from sitting with people for years now and learning directly from them what works and what doesn't. Because the greatest thing about working with these particular folks, there's no BS. If it works, and it's very obvious that they're doing exceptionally well. For example, someone that I would meet in a parking lot, missing most of their teeth due to decades on the streets. Infection, pain, suffering, mental disorder, mental health problems, inability to sleep, pain, harm. And 1 year later, seeing that same person completely healed, new teeth, employed, sober, thriving, moving to better housing, more stable housing, wondering, how do I get rent insurance? Because I need rent insurance. This is a nice place I'm going to live at. When I met the person back there and I go, well, was that just chance? Then the next person, and the next person, and the next person, to where the vast majority of people I work with thrive. So to me, I'm a researcher. I work in the front lines. When I see interventions that appear to be doing important, very heavy lifting, I get excited. And it just so happens that this is within the world of cannabis and cannabinoids. But again, I'm tool agnostic. If we could have a yoga studio that would do all of these things too, I would be at that yoga studio every day and send everyone there. But this is what I'm observing in our clinical research. And I had the pleasure of doing some work with two fine institutions, with Thompson Rivers University and UBCO Okanagan, and working with some fantastic researchers, Dr. Florian Fair here at the university at TRU, and Dr. Zach Walsh at UBCO Okanagan. And for these two institutions to partner up together with me to work through trying to understand exactly how this new approach is working and helping with groups of people that we're not expected to see thriving. We're happy if we would see a marginal, small percentage increase in just survival would be something. But unfortunately, the current, for example, just on the addictions treatment side, we have such low success rates that it is very painful when I see the incredible hard work being done by people and companies, organizations, the amount of heart we have in our community with frontline workers, with the social agencies that we have out there every single day, saving lives, making a difference with both arms tied behind their back. And they still manage every day to do all the good that they do, but they're fighting a chemical war without the right chemical weapons. This is a chemical war on our streets. And so to approach the problem with something other than a more effective tool, we are already unable to succeed. So my research premise is approach the chemical problem with a chemical tool head on. Look for symptom control, function, and quality of life, chemically induced. Then build the entire support service platform around the chemical success. Therefore, every dollar of intervention spent after chemical stability with cannabinoid therapy, the mental health dollar goes further. The housing dollar goes further. Any other treatment service goes further because the person is stabilized, sleeping, mental health controlled, pain controlled, trauma managed. And that individual can sit in that class and put their hand up and say, I want to speak. I want to share. Whereas without that, they will not They will stay in the back of the class. I'm not able to speak. I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. But in our program, what we observe is, yes, you can. And when you do, you rise. So for me, as a researcher, I always temper my enthusiasm, my excitement, my energy with this, with the fact that we always have limited sample sizes, many controls that we have to work with, and we're dealing with a population where the number of variables is incredibly difficult to put into neat categories and neat sort of boxes. And that's where I've seen the most excitement, where despite all of these factors, we use the same program across all of these symptom clusters. And this one simple intervention seems to be, in combination with conventional pharmacotherapy, supportive housing, additional mental health supports, other physician supports, people thrive. But if we do not meet chemical with chemical, non-toxic cannabinoids, pharmaceuticals, which are a mixed bag, as we've discussed, then we're faced with this incredibly powerful toxic drug supply, which hooks people and holds them. And when they leave it without something to take its place, there is an incredible risk of a person going back. And in today's climate and what's out there on the streets, if you go back, you die. And that's why we have to be focused on new and different ways to help people manage their pain and their suffering. And we need to look at things we haven't looked at yet. Because if the current strategies were going to deliver the results, why haven't they, Pete? Not enough money? Not enough resources? And I would argue, yes, there's always a need for more resources. But if right now we are at such a small amount of people who thrive with the current interventions, like imagine if you needed your car repaired, and let's just say 10% of the time your car was repaired. The other 90% of the time it was in some other form, but not repaired. Would you be like, well, that's a great repair shop. I'm going to tell everybody we should get it repaired over there because they get pretty close to 10% of the time. I just have to bring it back 10 times and I might get it fixed. But our current system, the difference is it's not a car. It's a person. And every relapse, every story I hear is of, 5 months ago, I was in a coma. I've overdosed 6 times. And I don't think I'll make it a 7th. So that's why I think it's so critically important that we are bold, why we are willing to look at new and different ways to approach these challenges. Because I think one thing everyone in our community can agree is that we're tired of the loss of life. We're done with one more day, one more person dying. I think we can all agree that the harms that everyone in our community experiences from these really difficult problems need to be addressed, but we can't agree on how. And I hear everybody on all sides. We want to depolarize. Look, I hear you why on this side you've had enough. And I hear you on this side why you're saying we just need to keep giving and keep giving more. I hear you, all those people. And I don't blame any of them. But I think the constructive, utility-based approach to this is to look at the one fundamental piece. Chemical problem, chemical solution first. And some people aren't going to like that, Pete. They're going to say, well, you can't give drugs to these people that are addicted to drugs. And I would argue we are using tools to do jobs, no different than any pharmaceutical medication. And to do otherwise is to put those people at risk of perhaps not knowing about or not seeking or not using a medication that may serve them and save their life.
We've been talking to Michael Koehn from the Cannsolve Clinic, and we're going to be back with just some wrap-up comments right after these messages from our sponsors.
In Kamloops, we're not just lawyers, we're forward law. We're about moving you forward. Approachable, caring, and experienced. That's who we are. From contract writing to estate planning, civil litigation to employment law, whatever your need, we've got your back. We push for fair resolutions. We're not afraid to take on the tough cases. Forward-thinking estate planning, strong advocacy, and unwavering support. Forward Law, your partner in progress. Call us today, because your future deserves nothing less. Welcome to the heart of business in Kamloops, Southgate Business Center, your one-stop destination for all your office needs. Conveniently located at 970 Laval Crescent, Southgate Business Center offers more than just office space. Whether you're a startup, a freelancer, or a well-established business, we've got you covered. Need a professional office space? Our offices provide the ideal environment for productivity and success. Planning a meeting or presentation? Elevate your business with our conference room available for rent. At Southgate Business Center, we understand the importance of efficiency. Our secretarial services ensure you have the support you need so you can focus on what matters most, growing your business. For office rentals, conference rooms, secretarial services, and more, contact Southgate Business Center at 250-374-9233 or visit us at 970 Laval Crescent in Kamloops. Southgate Business Center, your destination for success in the heart of Kamloops. Call us today and experience a new level of business excellence.
Okay, we are back with some final discussion with Michael Koehn from the Cannsolve Clinic, which is actually, for those of you that don't know, the Cannsolve Clinic is actually located in the what clinic, Michael?
It's the Aspen Medical Center.
In the Aspen Medical Center in North Hills Mall, where they have recently moved. Michael, so we were discussing just a little bit on break, and I think as sort of a wrap-up comment, I had lots of questions formulating in my mind, but perhaps the most important one that we kind of just focused in on break was the topic of safe supply. Now, this has been brought up in community so many times that things are still not working. Safe supply is not working. We have still the crises in our community. Within our discussion, and within my discussion with Dr. Ian Mitchell, it has been suggested that while safe supply is a great idea, it doesn't exist because you can't have safe supply without supply. Give me your thoughts on the issues around safe supply and perhaps where some solutions exist.
Yeah, great point, Pete, and a great big shout out to Dr. Ian Mitchell, a wonderful man in our community who has been providing medical cannabis care for many years now, and at a time when there's a lot of stigma attached to it. So big shout out to him. He's a wonderful man. Safe supply really revolves around the concept of harm reduction. And I think it's important to note that we're starting with the word harm. So by doing nothing, we have nothing but harm. So folks that are intending to put in any intervention that reduces harm at its core has really good intention behind it. And I think we need to realize that while there may be problems, there may be challenges associated with safe supply, the intention first behind it is to reduce harm and save lives. Okay, so I think we're agenda aligned in that anybody in our community would agree that we want to do that. Okay, now the supply problem is a really huge issue. From the context of the illicit drugs, the concept is pretty simple. If you buy a tainted toxic drug to treat your condition, to be able to get relief, then you are putting yourself at the risk of an unintended result. And this is where we see drug poisonings occurring all the time, and we see people dying from being poisoned by the drug supply. So folks that are trying to provide a purified, pharmacologically pure, tested substitute for these illicit drugs is attempting to remove the toxic component, the unknown toxic component, and to provide greater dosing accuracy, stability, to reduce the risk of what is already an elevated risk activity. So to reduce the risk and hopefully to allow people to receive more supports and more help. For example, if a person overdoses, will there be someone there to assist them? Things like this that are all very sensibly wrapped around the package of a safe supply. In particular, one of the things that comes out of research is that many folks who are using from the illicit drug supply are attempting to use medical cannabis, and in this case just cannabis, to help to address some of the side effects, some of the withdrawal symptoms, some of the trauma, the ability to be able to better cope and manage and function in an incredibly inhospitable environment. But if people don't have a place to be able to go to receive their cannabis, and I would argue to receive specific utility cannabis, cannabis that is designed to do jobs, not to say that we can precisely say this will do that, but that we have some specificity to it. We have some utility to it. Because folks that are suffering in this extremely risky environment need to have a consistent and regular access with as few barriers as possible. And currently today, no such supply exists in any formal channel. And so in our research, we look at the informal ones.
Just to be clear,
yes.
So no such access in Kamloops exists, not only for cannabis, but for even tested, clean, other drugs.
Yeah, we don't have the same kinds of services that you see in the Lower Mainland for some of those, and as contentious as they are, again, the intention behind them is to help. In Kamloops, for example, if you want to use cannabis, the first question is how much can you afford? Because if you want to purchase it either from a black market source or you want to go to a government store and purchase it from there, the key part behind both of those things is you need to purchase it. If a person needs a pharmaceutical drug because their doctor says you need treatment, typically those will be covered by MSP, and the barriers will be reduced in some ways, raised in others, but overall there is access, there is some supply to access. But if it's not for the contribution, the donation, the provision of medical cannabis tools to individuals who are in these populations, they don't have any access. And one of our key determinants is supply security. If you want to see someone move from just getting by to thriving, the one key factor in our research showed that supply security is the number one thing. If it's working, it needs to keep working. And unfortunately, folks with a poor or no supply can't create the right treatment program in the first place, but even if they could start it, they can't maintain it because we don't have a source at the street level, at the clinic level, in the medical system to be able to be authorized for cannabis and to have MSP cover it, which means that the only people in Canada who have coverage are veterans, which I celebrate, and I think it's an important start to a program that needs to be expanded to include other individuals who really require access to these tools. So it's good to note that the government has determined that at least one population within our country should receive and does receive complete coverage and funding for medical cannabis. It just requires a doctor's authorization and a reason for authorizing the cannabis. And after that, third-party billing will take care of their funding, and their products are mailed directly to them. They don't have to pay a dime, which is excellent for doing a clinical care for some of our most affected individuals who have served, which is great. We just need to expand this model to say it's obviously helping veterans. Well, there are a lot of other folks that I think we should similarly focus on creating programs that can help study those programs, determine their economic impact along with what I would argue is the most important, which is the human impact, the loss of life, the saving of life, the protection of life, and also to see, as we do in our research in a small scale, that when folks have the right supportive environment and they thrive, they move through the steps. They come off the streets, they get into housing, they get into healthcare, they get into education and employment. They do have a life going forward. And if we want to see that happen, we need to invest in providing safe supply.
Michael, thank you. As always, some brilliant thoughts and some amazing experience being shared with us. Thank you for giving so freely of your knowledge and your experience. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more from Michael Koehn, please make sure that you check out, is it cannsolve.ca?
It's actually cannsolve.com, CANNSOLVE.com, or give a phone call, 250-819-1313. We'd love to help you.
Awesome. And you've been watching The Crisis Storm. Can't wait to have you on our next episode. Until then, stay safe. You're watching or listening to The Crisis Storm. Crisis Storm is a longer format episodic video series and audio podcast series to inform and engage better conversations in our community around the collective crises we face in our community. All of us at the Crisis Storm podcast would like to thank our sponsors for their support and care for the community of Kamloops and its residents. First, the Southgate Business Center at 970 Laval Crescent in Kamloops provides rental offices, rental boardroom, and secretarial services. Second, the Crisis Storm podcast and our overall project, Finding a Way Forward, would also like to thank our sponsored Forward Law, where legal expertise meets genuine care. Forward Law is your partner in progress because your future deserves nothing less. If you found value in this episode of The Crisis Storm, please don't forget, give us a like, share it with others. Thank you for joining the conversation and being part of the solution to the many crises we face in community. Crisis Storm is a production of Mastermind Studios in association with the AIMCanada Mentorship Society. This series aims to inform and engage better conversations in our community around the collective crises stemming from homelessness, the economy, mental health, crime, healthcare, addictions, the environment, and a breakdown in good human communication. For more information on the Crisis Storm podcast series and the documentary film project titled Finding a Way Forward, please visit findingawayforward.com. Crisis Storm can be watched on YouTube, along with listening to the audio versions on many podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, and RSS. If you've got questions for the producers of this show or suggestions on topics and guests for future shows, please send them to info@mastermindstudios.ca.